So welcome everyone to today's Tech Accelerator. I'm Rob Kifis, and I'm part of our global customer success organization. And I lead a team of technical strategists that help build and scale Azure solutions worldwide. Today, I'm going to talk to you about migration to Azure and how this helps to accelerate AI innovations. We're going to specifically focus on security today. We're going to talk about security migration best practices. And I've got a lot of really interesting best practices to share with you as we go through the presentation. We're going to wrap it all up at the end. I'm going to have some exciting links for you, some resources for you to learn more and to kind of, go on your own journey. So first off, as you're all already aware, AI is shifting the business today, right? We talk a lot around agentic experiences with AI and having these agents that help us every day across a bunch of different things, whether it's personal, business projects, organizational, or cross-organizational agents. The thing to tell you about, though, is customers that are successful with AI and that have adopted AI are ones that have first migrated to Azure. We've seen an absolute acceleration of AI adoption with customers that have first migrated to Azure. It's actually just easier for them to go ahead and start working on AI initiatives if they have the bulk of their IT estate up into Azure today. We actually did some benchmark study, as you can see here on the slide, and what we found is about 75% of those that adopted AI had already migrated to Azure, and they have found it easier. This type of thing is like an important first step. And of course, one of the biggest blockers that I have found in migration has been around security. So that's what we're here to talk about today. We're going to talk about the importance of establishing security in migrations. You never want to get to a point where you have done all this difficult work of migrating your mission critical workloads into Azure, only to find out that you're blocked by a bunch of security requirements, or that you have found that you've had security incidents maybe in that environment before you even got a chance to go live. So we're going to talk about a lot of that today and what those best practices are. What are the challenges that we face when it comes to security and we think about what we're going to do with migration? One of the biggest challenges we have with security is, of course, it's just knowing what you have. Maybe we've got 1,000 servers, maybe we've got 50 servers, and we're going to migrate those into Azure. And there's going to be underlying services that go along with those virtual machines. There's going to be storage accounts and network, lots of different things. And understanding from a security perspective, all those different components is a huge challenge, just to know what you have and to know that whether or not it is following the proper security guidelines and best practices. Other biggest challenges, of course, is while you're working on this and while you're doing this, there's an increased amount and velocity of cloud attacks. Bad actors are out there. They know about the various clouds that folks are running and working in, and they are, coming up with plans and ways to infiltrate those systems. So those attacks are increasing. And the last thing, of course, from a challenging perspective on security is the time to remediate these threats. You could have a significant amount of technical debt that you've built or unknown technical debt when it comes to all these security best practices. And planning it out and remediating all of these threats can take a long time. So if we follow the best practices that I'm going to share with you, you'll have a much smoother adoption in Azure, and you'll have long-term success working in the cloud. What we're going to do is we're first going to talk about some of the best practices. And when we look at our best practices, we're going to talk about what are the essentials for successful migration. And in any of the ways that we've talked about essentials, we kind of break them up into three areas. We've got the readiness and foundation, and these are all the things to help you make sure your organization is aligned, you know what your goals are, you've got the right foundation for success. Then we've got design and govern, making sure that you've got the right design on day one. You're starting secure, right, on day one. And of course, govern is a big piece of this as well, because governance is all just about making sure that, you're maintaining, what your compliance is and that you're staying within compliance, and that, folks are all kind of operating with the same set of rules, right? And they're not going out of bounds of those rules. And the last thing, of course, manage and optimize is, are we monitoring our security, improving our security? Are we optimizing as far as, hey, we've got it to a certain point, but there are some additional things we could be doing to even improve our security posture more. So those are kind of the three areas when we think about what's essential for successful migration. And if I were to kind of drill in a little bit for you across those three buckets, what are the best practices that we're going to talk about today? So I've outlined here on the slide 6 best practices that we're going to jump into. And some of them I'm going to touch on, but I promise you on all of them, there will be some links and resources at the end for you to go ahead and learn more. So let's jump into the first section here. We're going to jump into our readiness and foundation. I've got 2 best practices to share with you. And the first one is going to be around the cloud adoption framework. And we've got the security or secure methodology. That's one of the methodologies in the cloud adoption framework. First off, if those of you that are not familiar what the cloud adoption framework is, you could think of this as the foundation to help you be successful long-term and at scale in Azure, right? How to onboard to Azure the right way. Okay, there's a lot of learnings and best practices spread across all the methodologies, but we're going to talk about the secure methodology here today because security is such a big piece of the puzzle, right? As far as making sure that you're secure on day one. We don't want you to have to go back and retrofit things later. We want you to make the right decisions up front as far as defining teams and roles to making sure that you've got the right security strategy. As you plan your migration, you're planning the security integrations at the same time. You put the right controls into place, and then you're putting the right governance and manage in place, meaning that you're monitoring it. You've got the right guardrails in place to make sure that you stay within your security controls. All of this is well defined in the secure methodology. We give you like a way to action that guidance because you're going to read through that and you're going to say, wow, there's a lot there. You know, how do I actually go ahead and action that guidance? We give you something called the Azure Landing Zone. The Azure Landing Zone builds you that foundation. It actions the guidance in the cloud adoption framework to put you on the right path on day one. You'll find that we have a lot of the security best practices, security policies, a role-based access control. All of that is built into Azure Landing Zone to really help you not only have a cloud operating model, but a secure cloud operating model. I've got a link here on the slide for where you get started with Azure Landing Zone, and you can give it a try at any time that you want. But this is the right way to start, a good way to start if you're fresh with Azure. And then you can bring your migration, workloads in. You can migrate your workloads into Azure once you, of course, have started and built out your Azure Landing Zone. And take a look, of course, at the cloud adoption secure methodology as well. The next one to touch on is going to be around design and govern, right? Ensuring that you've got governance in place. And this is like one of my favorite slides to show you here because governance really goes across a bunch of different disciplines. And it's important that you understand that it's a cycle, right? You're going to continue to iterate on governance and improve governance. You first got to understand, hey, what's my business risks, right? What are my policy and compliance and regulatory, requirements that I need to understand as a business, right? And what processes do I have in place today, right? What's the corporate policies, things like that. And you take that and you spread it across the 5 disciplines of governance. So, for example, cost management. And cost management may be as simple as that you put a governance policy in place that just says these particular SKUs of a VM, I don't want certain folks using or certain workloads using. Why would you do that? Because maybe it's very expensive. Maybe you didn't buy reserved instances or a savings plan for it. So there could be really good reasons for why you put governance and cost management. Your security baseline, of course, is huge, very relevant for secure migration, right? In this talk here, this is about making sure you know what the corporate policies are. And of course, what your regulatory compliance policies are as well. You make sure you bake all of those into your governance policies and you keep like chipping away at it. You may think, oh my gosh, this is so much that I have to do on day one. You just build a backlog of what you want to do for governance and keep working with the team to prioritize and implement policies as you go. Resource consistency could be as simple as locations, right? I only want to deploy my workloads in certain locations and I want to block these other locations. Resource consistency is we have not approved from a security team this particular service in Azure yet. So we're going to block this service from being utilized in our development teams, right? It could be as simple as that, right? Then you've got identity baseline and this is just making sure that, you're limiting who has access and access to what in a consistent manner. and that you've got good policy in place there. And then, of course, deployment acceleration. You could think of this as just making sure that if you're using like infrastructure as code, pipelines to deploy, that you're standardizing these things as much as possible so you don't have all unique templates floating around your environment, and that you've kind of built some sort of standards so everybody deploys a VM the same way, for example. Manage and optimize is probably the largest part where I'll spend the most time. And there's really 3 areas that we're going to go into here. We're going to go through Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Okay, we're going to talk about compliance and regulatory needs there. We're going to cover a little bit of Microsoft Sentinel and threat detection. And then the last thing is the well-architected framework. Specifically, we're going to talk about the security pillar. All right. All these things, of course, if you take a look at them, they're great best practices for you for securely migrating to Azure. And you'll see why in just a second. All right. So let's talk a little bit about Defender for Cloud. It's the first thing I want to share with you for Defender for Cloud is there's a free version of this. Okay. So you can use Defender for Cloud and it's going to help you on day one. There's no uplift or charge for some of the things that I'll show you. Other things, there is a charge, so you'll have to go ahead and take a look at that. But for Defender for Cloud, it's really here to help you lock down your compute, your database storage, your AI and service layers, right? I mean, what do I mean by lockdown? It means to understand that these things are secure, they're compliant with your regulatory and internal IT policies. If you do have things that are still on-prem that you are unable to migrate, because not everything is able to be migrated into Azure, that you can still understand where that lives in security, right? And get an idea of if it's protected or not. So there is some hybrid scenarios as well for you. So Defender for Cloud is all about minimizing your risk, being proactive. This is definitely one of the best practices we have. If you were to deploy Azure Landing Zone, which is one of the first things I covered, we default to turning on Defender for you as a best practice. That way you get a sense and a start of where you are, and to make sure that you're not going to deploy something in Azure that won't be protected, right? We really want to ensure and enforce that you're protecting your most critical resources especially for your mission critical workloads. Another kind of interesting thing about Defender is it will give you visibility into multi-cloud that you can actually deploy into other clouds as well. So it's not just for Azure. You can do AWS and GCP as well. So that's a nice little tool in your toolbox if you are multi-cloud and what you're doing. Defender for Cloud has quite a few different options, but the things I would tell you is first in native integrated security controls. What you can do is once you've got Defender for Cloud up and running, you can actually go in and check to see how you're doing against your compliance and policy needs. And it will tell you what your security posture is, right? It will say, hey, I'm going to go look at the security benchmark, right? And that's one of the tools that we have, and that is aligned to many different policies and many different regulatory requirements out there. You can see how you're doing and what you need. Hey, this storage account, I've got 9 out of 15 storage accounts that are compliant for this policy. So I still have some work to do to make sure I'm fully compliant here. So that is something that you can just start using right out of the box. And, I would encourage you to basically load that up, pick the subscriptions that you want to analyze, and it's going to give you, hey, this is how you're doing on the security benchmark, and these are the things that they would recommend that you fix up. You could also see how these align, like I said, if say that you needed to do HIPAA compliance, for example, or PCI compliance. Maybe you have like online purchasing and credit card processing, you need to be PCI compliant. You could actually take a look to see how you're doing against those compliances, and it'll tell you, and then you could kind of action that. And if you really wanted to, you could also put some policies in place to make sure that you've enforced these things moving forward in certain environments so that it can never become out of compliant. We have a lot of comprehensive coverage here, of course, with Azure. And on the previous slide, I showed a quick snapshot of some of the things, but we try to cover almost all of the services around compute, storage, databases, your application services that you use, your AI services that you use, to make sure that you have a really robust and comprehensive review of what your estate is that you've migrated into Azure. And the last thing is that we have a unified threat remediation, meaning we can help identify, investigate, and respond faster with the integration that we built. and that you would have in using Defender for Cloud. So that means that you'll be aware of what's happening faster. And a lot of times that you'll have like an industry leading solution that's integrated well into some of our other tools like Microsoft Sentinel to help you identify and quickly action and defend against, like a bad actor or something like that we've detected with Defender for Cloud. So this is kind of your one-stop shop. It's the starting point. It's deployed by default. One thing to share with you is we've done some analysis here. We did a little bit of like a Forrester consulting study, and we asked our customers, or our customer base, what was it like using Defender? How did they react to it? And so the first thing is that they said by unifying under Defender and not having all these other tools that they used to have, and there was definitely a cost savings by aligning under using Microsoft Defender for Cloud. And it just made things easier for them from an operational perspective within their organization. Think of like their SOC, for example. It's just something that made things easier for them, to less tools to have to manage. They found that they were able to respond in a shorter amount of time. Of course, this just is a reduction in time to remediate threats, right? This is a positive. And Defender helped alert them to things that were happening and for them to respond faster. And the last, of course, is compliance. And this is, like I said, one of the biggest barriers that I see for folks that are migrating into Azure is that they are not yet compliant in meeting IT policies, right? And until they do, they can't go live, right? And anything that reduces the amount of time it takes to do the audits and the checks and all that overhead that comes with it, right? I've got these internal policies. I've got to map them to the policies that are in the security benchmark. This helps save a considerable amount of time doing that work. And so then you can give the security team, like the audit findings and move forward. And once you've migrated, get it into production a lot faster. So Microsoft Sentinel, this is the next thing to talk about. And this is a great best practice as well. This is different than Defender for Cloud, right? This is about helping to understand what is coming in to your system, and is there a pattern here, something that we should take action on that's going to be an incident that we need to make sure our SOC is aware and we need to investigate. Basically, it helps facilitate all of that. So it is your threat analysis tool, okay? It's going to help you detect. And we have a lot of out-of-the-box detection in the system that help you find things that you should be aware of. It's going to help you lead a full-on investigation. You're going to jump through various pieces as you work your way through, and you're going to jump from one service to this user to another service. And it's going to really help you to visualize, scope in there, and focus on what's happening there. Then you can respond like, oh my gosh, all right, now that I know what the problem is, I know how to act, and I can act with some automation. So a lot of the threats that we look for and help you investigate, we've got response and automation built into Sentinel for you to help you auto response. And then sometimes you just want to do threat hunting, right? You want to take a series of folks on your team, and you're going to maybe just do some threat hunting. This is going to help you build some powerful queries, do some analytics, search and find bad actors in the system. We've built all this around the intelligence backed by our security experts. We've got a very, very robust community that helps us build out and contribute to this system. And this goes across your infrastructure, your devices, your users, and your applications. All right. This is the SIEM. A lot of folks may have an on-premise SIEM, but this is a SaaS-based service. So there's no infrastructure that you have to maintain, which is great because there's less overhead for you having to maintain this. And of course, because all the data is in the cloud, you're not moving data across from on-premise to in the cloud, so you're not incurring any expenses there as well. When we look at the SOC, what does the Security Operations Center, what are the hardest challenges that they face? And it really comes down to these four areas here. We're here to try to empower the SOC team to basically help accelerate some of these challenges to make their lives easier. Sometimes you guys are dealing with some very hard, urgent needs. And we want to make sure that you have confidence in the tooling, that you've got the flexibility in the system to do your own customizations and hunting, right? We've simplified this experience for you. And of course, this helps to accelerate migrations, right? You never want to get to a scenario where you're migrating into Azure. And once you've got a bunch of things running, you don't have any understanding of like, you're collecting all this telemetry, but you don't understand, like, are there any insights? Are there any threats happening? And if there are threats, how would you automate that? Because this is some of the stuff could be new to you. Sentinel helps with a lot of these things. For those that aren't familiar, the well-architected framework is we look at the lens from the application or the workload. Earlier, when I talked about the cloud adoption framework, the cloud adoption framework was making sure that you have that foundation for long-term success in Azure. The well-architected framework is making sure your applications and your mission-critical workloads are architected following best practices. It's as simple as that. It's the focus now is on the applications and workloads, not on the overall foundation. Sometimes there will be a little bit of overlap, but for the most part, just look at it through the lens of the application. There's 5 pillars of the well-architected framework. Of course, for today's discussion, we're going to focus the most on security, but you will also find great useful information around cost optimization, reliability, ops excellence, and performance efficiency. You're going to find great best practices there as well. And we bring it all together and we have certain scenarios that helps you kind of understand the trade-offs between some of the different pillars. But one thing I would tell you when you do think about, well, hey, if I implement this security best practice, it's going to cost me more money. There's 2 pillars here I would tell you don't make a cost trade-off for, and that would be security and reliability. Should never, especially if it's mission critical, should never compromise on those 2 because they're so important. When things go wrong in one of those 2 spaces, it's generally very, very noticeable for you. It's just something that we just don't want to see you running into. All right, so we have really good security guidance for you in the security pillar. First off, we're going to tell you, let's build on a secure foundation, right? You want multi-layer protection controls. One of the biggest things you're going to see, and you don't only see this in WAF, you will see this in secure under cloud adoption framework, is using zero trust principles. Make sure that you're reviewing those, and that's just making sure that you're limiting the access, just-in-time access. You're always assuming a breach, right, when it comes to security. So zero trust principles. If you follow those zero trust principles, and we have a lot of this outlined in the security pillar, what you'll find is that you're really thinking deeply on each component of your application, and when somebody has access to that component, what they can actually do and where they can actually go. The other thing is to stay secure with the native controls. So, of course, as I just talked about Defender for Cloud, we have a very robust set of policies, even based on industry. So go ahead and take a look at the controls that we have in place. If you started with the Azure Landing Zone, you're going to get a lot of those controls out of the box, but there's going to be many more that you're going to need to layer on top of it. So, of course, understanding what those controls are and using them. The next thing that we would list is just making sure that you understand you're protecting your workloads using Azure Firewall and, of course, our web application firewall, our WAF, right? Those are some offerings we have, some really good guidance, design and architectural guidance for that. And, of course, last, identity is a huge component of security, as you're all aware, making sure that you've updated your identity with using Entra and following the best practices there and making sure that you're doing the right things to, whether it's using multi-factor authentication or something of that nature, right, to make sure that your identity is very locked down. So last, of course, is detect and respond to threats. We talked about that a little bit we've, of course, got the intelligence security graph that feeds right into Sentinel. So you get great depth there. We've got Defender for Cloud for automation, protecting workloads in the guidance. And, of course, just make sure that you're mitigating the threats that come out and get detected with Sentinel as you're using this. All this is available for you. And you're probably like, oh my gosh, Rob, that's a lot. That's a lot for me to go through. How do I know which things to focus on? How do I prioritize? We actually have a well-architected review. And if you were to go to the link, and the link's available also in the slide deck here, we have a set of different well-architected reviews you can go about looking at. A couple that I'm going to call out for you, of course, is first, there's a security review. Please take a look at that. Run through the security review before you go into production. As you're working through your migration journey, you're going to, migrate a workload into Azure. You're going to go through, make sure that you've done all the policies, right, and all the the security hardening that you needed to do. You could run through this review. It's got a nice checklist in there just to make sure you didn't miss anything and that you're following all the best practices for that workload that's defined in the well-architected framework. You'll also find assessments in here for the other pillars as well. And there is an assessment that helps you kind of just overall kind of look across all 5 pillars. So if you want to do a specific pillar, you can, or you can go across all 5 pillars. It's totally up to you and how much time you have, but definitely look at the security one in there before you go live and almost add it to your checklist. Did you go through the secure checklist in the well-architected framework? And did you remediate any of maybe the high impact recommendations that came out of that assessment? How do you get help from Microsoft? So that was all self-service, right? And everything I've shared with you is self-service, meaning that you can go, you can find these things, learn about these things, and go ahead and implement them, right? But you may say, well, you know, what can Microsoft do to help me? There's a lot here. Maybe you're really new to Azure and you would like a little bit more like white glove treatment with us. So we've got some different programs for you that take a look at, okay? And I've got the links here in the bottom of the slide. So first, if you think about Azure Innovate, this would be something that you aren't migrating. So this would be like, hey, we have a really cool idea. We would like to test out and try and build in Azure, okay? That's net new, kind of a new idea, Azure Innovate. Where this more comes into what we're discussing around secure migration is there's a program called Azure Migrate and Modernize, meaning that either you've got something you need to migrate into Azure. So maybe you're just going to move it over into Azure pretty simply, but you also may want to modernize it as you do and say, hey, certain things I'm not going to migrate just straight up. I'm actually going to start moving to some PaaS services for some of them. There's no reason for me to bring the whole VM, for example. I can just bring the website. We have a program to help you with that if that's something that you're interested. And of course, whenever you do any of these things, of course, the secure migration best practices, we make sure that we instill in that program. And then there's Azure Essentials, right? Say you've already got something, you moved it over. It's been running in Azure for a little while. You may have had reliability challenges. Maybe you've had security challenges, right? Maybe you would just like someone to come in and take a look and just help you understand where you are today and where you can optimize moving forward. Azure Essentials is the program for you there. And there's a free Azure Essentials resource kit. I've got the link there for you. And that will help you just to understand how to get started with Azure Essentials and the things that are available for you in that program. As I told you through the talk, there's a number of links to go through here. I wanted to leave a few of them with you just to help you get started. On the left-hand side, you're going to find some good links around secure migration, some great blog post content there. Take a look at that. It's really going to help you. And then, of course, Azure Essentials, like I had on the last slide. This is really, again, of course, a good link for you to try and get started. This is about, hey, maybe I did migrate, but I don't know if I've done everything I should have done following the best practices. This will help you to kind of understand where you are today with Azure Essentials. And with that said, I'm going to leave you with our Microsoft security event, right? We've got RSAC 2025. There's a QR code here for you. Take a look at that. And we look forward to seeing you join us at that event. Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions.